seconds before the ice breaks. November 19th, 1942. Southwest of Stalingrad. For 30 hours. The steppe is motionless. Snow lies thin and uneven across frozen earth, hardened by weeks of cold. The temperature has fallen well below zero. Breath hangs in the air, visible, slow to disperse. Boots creak faintly as men shift their weight, careful not to make sound. German forward positions stretch along shallow trenches scraped into frozen ground. Rifles are leaned against parapets crusted with ice. Fingers, numb inside gloves, rest stiffly on wood and steel. Lubricants have thickened overnight. Metal contracts in the cold. Everything feels tighter than it should. There is no artillery fire, no engines, no flares, only wind moving across open ground. Beyond the darkness, unseen and silent, tens of thousands of Soviet soldiers lie concealed along a front that appears quiet, almost abandoned. Tanks sit hull down behind snowbanks and folds in the land. Artillery crews stand by their guns, hands already burning from cold iron. Watches are checked again and again. In the German lines, there is confidence born of habit. The enemy has been pushed back for months. Winter has come early and hard. The front feels stable. Reports suggest no immediate threat. Men stamp their feet to keep circulation alive and wait for dawn. No one on this line has been told what will happen next. The sky remains dark. The cold deepens. Time stretches. In a few minutes, the silence will end, not gradually but all at once. And when it does, the war on the Eastern Front will cross a point from which it cannot return. The road to winter. By the autumn of 1942, the war in the East has already devoured entire armies. What began in June 1941 as a lightning campaign, Operation Barbarossa, has stretched into a grinding continental struggle. The Wehrmacht has taken millions of prisoners, seized vast territories, and inflicted losses unmatched in modern warfare. Yet it has failed to deliver a decisive collapse. The Soviet Union is still fighting. Germany enters 1942 under pressure. The failure to take Moscow the previous winter has shaken confidence, but not intent. Adolf Hitler is determined to regain initiative. The solution, as he sees it, lies in the south. Oil. The German war economy is strained. Synthetic fuel production cannot meet demand. Romanian oil fields are vulnerable. The Caucasus offers abundance and denial to the enemy. Capturing it becomes the strategic centerpiece of a new campaign. In April 1942, Directive Number 41 outlines the plan. Case Blue. Army Group South is split in two. Army Group A is to drive into the Caucasus. Army Group B is tasked with securing the northern flank along the Volga. Stalingrad enters the plan not initially as a symbolic objective, but as a geographic one. The city controls traffic on the Volga, the artery that feeds Soviet industry and logistics. Its factories produce tractors that can become tanks. Its rail lines connect the interior to the south. As summer advances, momentum returns to the German side. Soviet formations fall back under pressure. Vast distances are crossed again. Dust replaces snow. Heat exhausts men and machines alike. But the deeper the Wehrmacht advances, the longer its supply lines stretch. Fuel must travel hundreds of kilometers by rail, then truck. Roads degrade. Vehicles wear out. Replacement parts lag. Infantry divisions march on foot, their pace dictated by exhaustion rather than planning. By August, the offensive begins to fragment. Hitler intervenes directly in operational decisions. Objectives multiply. Army Group South is split more sharply than planned. Forces intended for mutual support are pulled in different directions. Stalingrad, once secondary, becomes central. The city carries Stalin's name. Its capture promises propaganda value as much as military advantage. Hitler fixates. Orders emphasize seizure at all costs. Flexibility narrows. The Sixth Army, under General Friedrich Paulus, is drawn into the fight. It is a powerful formation, over 250,000 men at peak strength, but is not structured for prolonged urban warfare without secure flanks. The battle for the city becomes a battle of attrition. street by street, factory by factory, floor by floor. German artillery and air power devastate Stalingrad's surface. Buildings collapse into rubble that favors defenders. Soviet units cling to narrow strips along the Volga, supplied under fire at night by boats crossing icy water. The front compresses into chaos. Casualties rise. Ammunition expenditure is enormous. Replacements arrive undertrained. Winter clothing is delayed. German planners expect the campaign to end before severe cold sets in. It does not. By October, temperatures drop sharply. Rain turns to snow. Mud freezes into ruts that shatter suspensions and delay movement. The German advance slows to meters per day. Meanwhile, the flanks of the Sixth Army are held not by German divisions, but by Axis allies, Romanian, Italian, and Hungarian units. They are under-equipped for winter warfare. Anti-tank weapons are scarce. Morale is fragile. These formations hold long, exposed sectors across open steppe. The German command is aware of the vulnerability, but resources are committed elsewhere. There are no reserves sufficient to reinforce the line. Behind the front, Soviet preparations continue. The Red Army has learned from catastrophe. It absorbs punishment, then adapts. Industry evacuated east of the Urals now produces tanks, guns, and ammunition in vast numbers. New formations are raised. Veterans from earlier battles provide hardened cadres. And above all, Soviet planners wait. They wait for the Germans to commit fully. They wait for winter. They wait for the moment when strength has moved too far forward to turn back. By mid-November 1942, the conditions are set. The German army believes it is close to victory in the south. The Red Army knows the line is about to break. The steppe is quiet now, but is no longer empty. The shape of the trap. By November 1942, the Eastern Front is defined as much by exhaustion as by ideology. Both sides have lost millions. Entire regions are depopulated. Cities lie in ruin. Yet the strategic imbalance that defined 1941 has narrowed. The Soviet Union no longer fights for survival alone. It fights with regained capacity. This recovery is not accidental. Soviet leadership, guided by the Stavka, has imposed a brutal clarity on planning. The disasters of the first year have eliminated illusions. Flexibility replaces rigidity. Defense in depth becomes standard. Above all, deception is elevated to doctrine. Maskirovka, the art of concealment, shapes the coming offensive. Troop movements occur at night. Dummy positions draw German attention. Radio silence masks massing forces. Entire armies are shifted under the cover of routine activity. German intelligence fails to grasp the scale. Reports note increased Soviet activity, but interpret it as local reinforcement. The belief persists that the Red Army is near exhaustion. This assumption is reinforced by visible weakness inside Stalingrad, where Soviet defenders appear stretched to the limit. The real concentration is elsewhere. North and south of the city, along the Don River and the open steppe beyond, Soviet fronts assemble quietly. Tank armies are rebuilt. Artillery density increases to levels not previously seen. Ammunition stockpiles grow deep. Weather assists. Cold suppresses movement. Snow muffles sound. Rivers freeze solid, creating new avenues of advance. German aerial reconnaissance is degraded by cloud cover and limited daylight. The Red Army understands winter. Units are equipped with padded uniforms, felt boots, white camouflage. Weapons are maintained with winter lubricants. Ski battalions train for mobility across snowbound terrain. German units, by contrast, remain dependent on expectations that winter will slow both sides equally. Equipment modification is uneven. Winter clothing arrives late, often in insufficient quantities. Vehicles suffer from frozen fuel lines and brittle components. The disparity widens as temperatures fall. Strategically, the Soviet plan is ambitious but precise. Rather than attempt to relieve pressure inside Stalingrad directly, Stavka aims to destroy the conditions that make the battle possible. The objective is encirclement. Operation Uranus is designed to strike the weakest points of the German line, the extended flanks held by Axis allies. The plan calls for two massive pincers to cut deep, converge behind the Sixth Army, and seal it off from resupply and retreat. Timing is critical. The northern blow will fall on the Romanian Third Army along the Don. The southern strike will hit Romanian Fourth Army units positioned southwest of Stalingrad. Both are thinly spread. Both lack adequate anti-tank defenses. Both are already under strain. German High Command is aware of the possibility of Soviet counteroffensive in general terms, but does not expect it on this scale, nor at this time. Reserves are limited. Panzer divisions are tied down in urban fighting or deployed far from the threatened sectors. Hitler's directives emphasize holding ground. Withdrawal is discouraged. Flexibility is constrained. Local commanders who suggest pulling back to shorten lines are overruled. This rigidity becomes decisive. As November deepens, the weather stabilizes into hard frost. The ground becomes load-bearing. Tanks no longer bog down. Movement, once impossible, becomes feasible. The Soviet command waits for this moment. Artillery is positioned with exacting care. Guns are zeroed. Firing tables adjusted for cold air density. Infantry rehearses attacks in terrain resembling their objectives. The men know what is coming. Across the line, German soldiers sense only that the cold has intensified, that the nights are longer, that rations are thinner, that mail arrives irregularly. The front appears quiet, too quiet. Before dawn on November 19th, Soviet watches reach 0 hour. The war in the South is about to change direction, not through gradual pressure, but through sudden rupture. The steppe, frozen and silent, becomes the hinge on which the entire Eastern Front will turn. 1. The human body versus winter. Cold is not a background condition. It is a constant assault. By late November 1942, temperatures across the lower Volga region regularly fall below minus 20 degrees Celsius at night. Wind strips warmth from exposed skin in minutes. Metal burns to the touch. Sweat freezes inside clothing. German infantry endure the cold with inadequate protection. Many units still wear summer boots. Socks are layered until circulation fails. Frostbite appears first in toes and fingers, then spreads. Men continue to fight with numb hands because stopping invites worse injury. Hunger compounds the damage. Rations arrive irregularly. Caloric intake drops below what the cold demands. Weight loss is visible. Weakness follows. Soviet troops suffer as well, but they are better prepared. Quilted jackets, fur-lined boots, and mittens preserve heat. Units rotate exposure where possible. Hot food is prioritized before operations. Cold dictates posture. Soldiers hunch, conserving warmth. Movement is deliberate. Sleep comes in fragments, interrupted by shivering that never fully stops. The body becomes another battlefield, one that neither side can abandon. 2. Tactical reality. The terrain around Stalingrad offers no cover in winter. Open steppe stretches for kilometers, broken only by shallow ravines and frozen riverbeds. Snow reveals movement instantly. Camouflage is essential, yet imperfect. When fighting shifts into villages, the conditions worsen. Rubble traps snow and ice. Interiors offer little insulation. Fires risk detection and artillery response. Frozen ground alters combat. Foxholes are shallow. Mines are difficult to emplace. Bodies remain where they fall, sometimes for days because burial is impossible. Visibility fluctuates. Fog forms over frozen ground at dawn. Smoke lingers without wind. Engagements begin suddenly and end abruptly, dictated by sight lines rather than intent. Urban fighting inside Stalingrad itself has already reshaped doctrine. Small units operate independently. Initiative shifts to junior leaders. Close quarters combat negates range advantages. Now, as operations expand beyond the city, those lessons follow. The battlefield is not continuous. It is a series of isolated, lethal encounters. 3. Weapons and technology under cold. Cold attacks machinery as relentlessly as it attacks flesh. German small arms function reliably if maintained, but oil thickens. Bolts cycle slowly. Machine guns require constant attention. Any lapse invites stoppage at the worst moment. Artillery crews struggle with recoil mechanisms stiffened by ice. Ammunition fuses behave unpredictably. Rate of fire drops. Vehicles suffer more. Fuel gels. Batteries fail. Engines must be kept running to avoid freezing, consuming precious fuel. Tanks abandoned overnight may not restart. Soviet equipment is simpler and more tolerant of abuse. T-34 tanks are designed with wide tracks and diesel engines, less susceptible to cold. Maintenance is brutal but effective. The difference is not absolute, but under these conditions, small advantages become decisive. Technology does not dominate the battlefield. It survives it or does not. 4. Leadership at the edge. Command in winter warfare is an exercise in limitation. Orders take longer to transmit. Radios fail. Runners move slowly through snow. Decisions are made with incomplete information and little margin for correction. German command emphasizes control. Orders flow downward. Initiative is constrained by directives that prioritize holding ground. Officers are expected to enforce discipline under conditions that erode it daily. Soviet command allows more flexibility at lower levels. Objectives are clear, but methods adapt to circumstance. Units exploit opportunity when it appears. Leadership presence matters. Officers who share exposure maintain cohesion. Those who remain distant lose authority quickly. Trust becomes a survival tool. As winter deepens, command is tested not by grand strategy, but by endurance, physical, mental, and moral. Every decision carries immediate cost, and none can be delayed. The strain is now visible on every level: body, terrain, weapon, and command. But these are only the pressures. The breaking point is still ahead. When the line begins to fracture 5. Psychological collapse. Encirclement begins in the mind before it appears on maps. In the days leading up to Operation Uranus, German frontline units sense a change without understanding its cause. Soviet artillery fire increases in volume, but not in pattern. Reconnaissance patrols encounter resistance where none existed before. Prisoners speak less. Silence replaces noise. When the attack comes, it arrives with overwhelming force. Units on the flanks crumble within hours. Communications falter. Reports contradict each other. Rumors outrun orders. Inside the German rear areas, the word Kessel, cauldron, begins to circulate before it is officially acknowledged. Psychological strain accelerates physical collapse. Soldiers calculate distances not in kilometers, but in rations and ammunition. Hope narrows to immediate survival. Confidence in relief fades with each frozen night. Discipline holds unevenly. Some units maintain order and cohesion. Others fragment, dissolving into small groups, moving without direction. Officers struggle to enforce commands when movement itself becomes punishment. For Soviet soldiers, the psychological terrain is different. Momentum restores belief. Encirclement transforms fear into purpose. The enemy is no longer advancing. He is contained. Certainty replaces doubt. Morale becomes asymmetric. 6. Enemy miscalculation. The disaster unfolding around Stalingrad is not the result of a single error. It is the accumulation of assumptions. German planning underestimates Soviet operational capacity. The Red Army is judged incapable of coordinating large-scale armored offensives in winter. This belief persists despite evidence to the contrary. The strength of Axis Allied forces is overestimated. Romanian units are expected to hold extended sectors with minimal support. Requests for additional anti-tank weapons go unanswered. Logistical risk is accepted rather than mitigated. Fuel shortages are treated as temporary constraints. Air resupply is assumed to be feasible at scale, despite weather and distance. Above all, flexibility is sacrificed to resolve. Orders to hold ground override situational awareness. Retreat is framed as defeat rather than maneuver. When Soviet pincers close near Kalach, The response is delayed by disbelief. By the time countermeasures are authorized, conditions have already shifted beyond correction. The encirclement is not sudden. It is allowed to happen. By late November 1942, the Eastern Front has entered a new phase. The pressures applied, physical, tactical, mechanical, psychological, now converge. What had been strain becomes rupture. What had been belief collapses into fact. The moment approaches when maps can no longer disguise reality. The ice storm has done its work, and now the front will break. The encirclement closes. November 23, 1942. Calic on the Don. 1600 hours. The bridge is still standing. That alone matters. South of Calic, Soviet armored columns advance through snow-choked ravines and open steppe, engines roaring despite the cold. Tracks grind against frozen soil. Infantry clings to tanks, boots swinging inches above the ground. Faces are wrapped in scarves stiff with ice. From the north, another armored force pushes forward. 6th Tank Corps, moving fast, moving light, accepting losses for speed. Radio traffic is brief and functional. Orders are clear. Maintain momentum. Do not stop. At the bridge over the Don River, German rear area troops attempt to organize a defense. Anti-tank guns are placed hastily. Ammunition is limited. The riverbanks are frozen hard, offering no natural barrier. At 1610, Soviet tanks reach the outskirts of Calic. By 1630, resistance collapses. The bridge is taken intact. 2 Soviet spearheads, one from the north, one from the south, link up before nightfall. Officers exchange brief confirmations. Coordinates are checked. The circle is complete. More than 250,000 Axis soldiers are now trapped inside a pocket stretching across ruined suburbs, frozen fields, and a shattered city of Stalingrad itself. Inside the encirclement, the realization spreads unevenly. Some units receive the news immediately. Others learn through broken radio messages or fleeing stragglers. Many do not understand the scale until days later, when movement orders fail to arrive and supply columns stop appearing. At 6th Army Headquarters, the situation is reported upward with urgency. Maps are updated. The line is redrawn, tighter now, unforgiving. General Friedrich Paulus requests authorization to break out to the southwest while fuel and cohesion remain. The answer does not come. In Berlin, the decision is already forming. Holding the pocket. Within 48 hours, the Luftwaffe begins airlift operations. The requirement is clear: 300 tons of supplies per day, fuel, ammunition, food, medical equipment. The reality is harsher. Weather grounds aircraft. Airfields inside the pocket are damaged or overrun. Soviet fighters and anti-aircraft fire thicken around approach routes. On most days, less than 100 tons arrive. Fuel shortages immobilize armored vehicles. Artillery units ration shells. Wounded men accumulate in cellars and ruined factories, untreated, freezing. Temperatures drop further. Nighttime lows plunge below -20 degrees Celsius. German positions shrink inward as Soviet forces compress the perimeter. Every contraction costs ground, equipment, and men. Defensive lines are shortened not by design, but by necessity. Commanders at battalion and company level improvise. Units are merged. Headquarters are abandoned. Maps lose relevance as landmarks disappear under snow and rubble. The Soviet ring does not rush. It tightens. Artillery fire increases methodically, not to break through, but to exhaust. Observation balloons rise over the steppe when weather allows. Reconnaissance flights map German movements inside the pocket. Time becomes a weapon. By early December, the trapped army has ceased to be an offensive force. It is no longer maneuvering. It is enduring. The question is no longer whether the pocket can be held. It is whether it will be relieved or erased. Beyond the encirclement, German relief forces begin to assemble. Fuel is scraped together. Units are redeployed under winter conditions that punish every kilometer of movement. One last attempt is being prepared. And inside the pocket, men wait, not knowing which will arrive first. Relief or collapse. Operation Winter Storm. December 12, 1942. Kotelnikovo. Before dawn. The temperature hovers near minus 25 degrees Celsius. Engines are started hours early, coaxed into life with open flames and heated oil. Metal contracts, then shrieks as it moves. Tank crews work without gloves, fingers burning, then numbing. Breath hangs in the air, thick and white. This is Operation Winter Storm. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein has assembled what strength remains in the southern sector. LVI Panzer Corps, spearheaded by 6th Panzer Division, fresh from France, but untested in Russian winter. The objective is narrowly defined. Drive north along the Oksay and Mishkova rivers, break through Soviet blocking forces, and reach the encircled 6th Army. Speed is essential. Fuel is limited. The window is short. At first, the advance goes well. Soviet forward units are pushed aside. German armor regains a sense of momentum long absent on the Eastern Front. Villages fall one by one, their names barely noted. Columns push through drifting snow under low, gray skies. By December 18th, Manstein's lead elements reach the Mishkova River, less than 50 kilometers from the Stalingrad pocket. Inside the encirclement, officers listen for the distant thunder of guns. They hear nothing. Paulus again requests permission to break out southward toward Manstein's forces. Fuel has been hoarded for this purpose. A narrow corridor might be possible. The army is weak, but still coherent. The response arrives from Hitler personally. Hold Stalingrad. No breakout. Relief will arrive. The order is absolute. Winter storm continues, but its momentum falters. The Soviets have anticipated the attempt. Little Saturn. On December 16th, while German relief forces advance from the south, the Red Army launches Operation Little Saturn against Axis forces along the Middle Don. Italian 8th Army units, under-equipped, overstretched, collapse under mass Soviet armor and infantry assaults. Defensive lines disintegrate within hours. Entire divisions cease to exist as coherent formations. The Soviet breakthrough threatens Manstein's flanks. Reserves meant to push toward Stalingrad are diverted south and west to prevent encirclement of the relief force itself. The spearhead slows, then stops. By December 23rd, Winter Storm is called off. The distance between Manstein and Paulus remains unclosed. The pocket remains sealed. Inside Stalingrad, the reality settles in. There will be no relief. Food rations are cut again. Horses are slaughtered. Leather is boiled. Ammunition is conserved to the point where some positions are abandoned without a fight. The wounded freeze where they lie. By January, temperatures drop further. Frostbite becomes more common than gunshot wounds. Entire platoons lose the ability to hold weapons. Soviet forces prepare the final phase. They will not storm the city. They will crush it. On January 10th, 1943, a preparatory bombardment begins. Thousands of guns firing in coordinated waves. The earth shakes. Ruins collapse inward. Trenches vanish under snow and debris. The pocket splits in two. Then again, by January 31st, Paulus is promoted to Field Marshal, a rank no German officer has ever surrendered with. He does not speak the expected words. On February 2nd, 1943, organized resistance in Stalingrad ends. The ice storm passes. Nothing remains intact. The cost measured in silence. February 1943. Stalingrad. The guns stop first. Then the wind becomes audible again, moving through broken steel, across frozen rubble, over bodies left where they fell. Snow covers everything evenly. Rank insignia, unit patches, faces. The battlefield loses shape. Only the scale remains. Of the roughly 300,000 Axis troops committed to the Stalingrad campaign, more than 200,000 are dead, wounded, or captured. Approximately 91,000 German soldiers enter Soviet captivity, including 22 generals. Fewer than 6,000 will ever return home. The Red Army has paid heavily as well. Soviet casualties exceed 1 million, including killed, wounded, missing, and captured. Entire rifle divisions have been destroyed and reformed. Tank brigades have been burned down to skeletal strength and rebuilt from factories working through blackout nights. But the balance has shifted. For the first time, a full German field army has been annihilated. Not pushed back, not delayed, destroyed. In Berlin, the announcement is delayed, then diluted, then framed as heroic sacrifice. The word surrender is avoided. Public morale cracks anyway. The illusion of invincibility, carefully cultivated since 1939, cannot be restored. On the Eastern Front, the psychological shock travels faster than any communique. German units everywhere reassess their positions. Commanders shorten lines. Divisions once meant for offense dig in deeper than ever before. Requests for winter clothing, fuel, and replacements become urgent, then desperate. The Red Army draws a different lesson. Encirclement works. Massed artillery works. Time favors the side that can endure. Factories east of the Urals continue to push out T-34 tanks, IL-2 aircraft, artillery pieces, ammunition, more than the front can immediately absorb. Training improves. Coordination between infantry, armor, and artillery becomes more precise with each operation. Stalingrad becomes a reference point, a proof, a warning. Along the frozen Volga, Soviet soldiers erect simple markers over mass graves. Names are rare. Units are listed instead. Dates often end in January or February 1943. The city itself no longer functions as a city. More than 90% of its buildings are destroyed or damaged. Infrastructure is gone. Civilians who survived did so underground, in basements that collapsed around them, or by evacuation across the river under fire months earlier. Reconstruction will take years. Memory will take longer. And as winter begins to loosen its grip, the front does not pause. It moves west. The next decisions are already being made. What survived the winter? Spring 1943. Eastern Front. As the snow retreats, it reveals what winter concealed. Wrecked vehicles emerge from drifts. Panzer III hulls split by shell fire. Frozen horses collapsed mid-stride. Artillery pieces abandoned with breeches open. The land remembers even when armies move on. For the German army, Stalingrad leaves a structural wound. Veteran formations are gone. Officer cadres, irreplaceable under wartime conditions, are dead or in captivity. Training pipelines cannot compensate fast enough. Divisions rebuilt after February 1943 carry the same numbers, the same insignia, but not the same experience. Command culture changes. Where initiative once defined German operations, caution now intrudes. Requests for approval multiply. Withdrawal plans are drafted earlier. Elastic defense replaces audacious thrust. The belief that discipline and maneuver alone can overcome material inferiority no longer survives contact with reality. Hitler's response is not adaptation, but control. Operational freedom narrows. Orders become more rigid. Ground is to be held regardless of cost. Field commanders who argue are replaced or sidelined. Strategic flexibility, once Germany's greatest advantage, erodes under centralized command. The Red Army, by contrast, institutionalizes what it has learned. Stalingrad validates deep battle doctrine in practice, not theory. Sequential offensives, layered defenses, and coordinated fronts become standard. Commanders like Zhukov, Vasilevsky, and Rokossovsky gain authority through results, not rhetoric. Crucially, Soviet forces learn restraint. They do not immediately pursue everywhere. They consolidate. They rotate exhausted units. They rebuild logistics before pushing forward again. The operational tempo becomes deliberate, relentless, sustainable. Across occupied Europe, the news travels quietly but decisively. Resistance movements take heart. Allied planners reassess timelines. Neutral observers begin to calculate not how Germany might win, but how long it can hold. Even in captivity, Stalingrad echoes. German prisoners march east through villages that have lost sons, homes, entire generations. Civilians watch in silence. There is no celebration. Only recognition. The war has crossed a threshold. After Stalingrad, there is no return to equilibrium, no negotiated balance, no illusion of recovery. Every subsequent German operation is conducted under constraint of manpower, of fuel, of time. The Eastern Front becomes a slow collapse measured in kilometers and casualties. Winter 1942-43 does not end the war, but it decides its direction. And as spring mud replaces ice, the armies prepare once more, now knowing exactly what the cost of failure looks like. What the ice revealed. Winter does not choose sides. On the Eastern Front, it stripped war down to its essentials: movement, supply, endurance, command. In the frozen months of 1942 and early 1943, technology mattered less than preparation. Courage mattered less than logistics. Ideology mattered less than calories, fuel, and the ability to replace losses faster than they were incurred. Stalingrad did not end the conflict between Germany and the Soviet Union. It clarified it. From this point forward, the war in the East became a contest of systems rather than moments. The Red Army proved it could absorb catastrophe, learn from it, and return stronger. The German army discovered that operational brilliance could not compensate indefinitely for strategic overreach and political interference. The winter exposed limits that could no longer be hidden. It revealed that armies fighting thousands of kilometers from their industrial base cannot survive on confidence alone. That command structures rigid under pressure fracture. That weather, when ignored, becomes an enemy as lethal as any opposing force. For the men who endured it, there was no grand lesson in real time. There was only the cold biting through boots and gloves, the sound of frost cracking wood, the weight of weapons that grew heavier each day, the knowledge that survival depended less on heroism than on whether food arrived, whether engines started, whether orders made sense. History often marks turning points with dates and names. But the true shift on the Eastern Front occurred gradually, measured in frozen nights, stalled engines, and the slow realization that momentum had changed hands. After winter 1942-43, German forces would continue to fight fiercely, skillfully, and at enormous cost. But they would no longer dictate the terms of the war. The initiative passed quietly and irrevocably into Soviet hands. What followed? Kursk, the long retreats westward, the battles for Poland and Germany itself, were consequences set in motion by decisions made before the frost and realities enforced by the ice. The winter did not roar. It pressed down patiently until something broke.